Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Empowered Spirit Healing. Today, we are very excited to continue on with our Edgar Cayce series, learning all about Atlantis. And we are joined by the beautiful Jennifer. How are you going today?
I'm great, Paula. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you. I'm very excited to get into all of the exciting things that we're going to cover.
I was gonna, yeah, I was gonna ask you if you're ready to hop on the Casey roller coaster because it's gonna be a wild ride. It gets wilder and wilder the
It
more we
really
learn about
does.
this.
I feel
Yes,
like the more that we're learning about all of this, it just gets crazier and crazier, doesn't it?
yes, and it's a lot of fun.
It is. It is. It's
Yes.
fascinating. So let's get stuck into it. And I'm going to bring up the slides. So we are up to the second fall of Atlantis with Edgar Cayce.
All right. Before there were the second upheavals, when there was the dividing of islands, when the temptations were begun in the activities of the sons of Belial and the children of the law of one, the entity was among those that interpreted the messages that were received through the crystals and the fires that were to be the eternal forces of nature and made for helpful forces in the experience of groups during the period. And the reading continues on. New developments in the air, in water travel, were the beginning of the developments at that period for the escape. So the first destruction came down, and they had 20,000 years or so to recover. And there's still these groups warring, and the technology sounds to me, even in comparison to the third destruction, the technology seemed to be at its height during this period of Atlantis.
Yeah.
And he also mentions specifically that it's the most time where they had the most psychic power.
Yes. I know. I'm just blown away by the kind of technology and scientific advances that they made during this time. And yeah, these new developments in air and water travel, and the fact that they were preparing it for the escape. So it's like they
Yeah,
already knew.
they knew it was coming. And I just kind of picture these two groups just like launching a weapon and having a little blow up here and it just be like a game to them.
Hmm.
And I think the Emilius group was like, yeah, we can't do this anymore. So they created travel to get people out of harm's way, which is
Yeah.
mind blowing for any type of entity or agency or government to do for their people. And it just is mind blowing to me that they were like, yeah. So again, we have Atlanteans fleeing, we have Atlanteans staying on the island, holding their ground, and
Hmm.
then we had many Atlanteans that passed.
Yeah. And so if we think about this, I mean, that really puts the whole typical scientific story that we are only a few thousand years old. It's like, well,
Yeah,
this was, 20 odd thousand years ago, and the people were escaping Atlantis at this time, going to different parts of the world to
yeah,
take refuge. It just goes to show that there was life living all over the place a long,
yeah.
long time ago.
I
And
just
it's
think the Atlanteans were probably the most technologically and spiritually developed on Earth at the time.
at that
I'm
time,
thinking
yeah.
that's my thoughts about that.
Hmm. I guess, yeah, apart from probably Lemuria as well. But
Yeah,
Lemuria had its own, was it maybe coming to its end at that time, do you think?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, because they had their dramas too, by the sounds
Yes.
of it.
Yeah. I know. I can't wait to dig into that a little deeper
Yeah.
eventually.
Okay, so the entity was a priestess in that experience just before there were the activities of the sons of Belial that brought about the period of the second destruction of the land. From reading 23901.
Yes. So it just kind of goes back to show you that they trained these priestesses to work with this Firestone, and we'll get into the Firestone here shortly.
Hmm.
And the Belial group basically hijacked that technology,
Yeah.
and you know, they weren't talking to the saintly realm, let's say,
Yeah, they were
and
talking to a whole other group of
whole other
people.
group of warmongering kind of entities,
Hmm.
obviously, since the weapons they created and launched. But I want to circle back to the first destruction real quick. I heard something in a podcast that, because we talked about the meeting of nations to combat the land beasts that were overtaking the people. Well, I've come across information this week that the Atlanteans created those animals,
Yeah.
and they got out of control. So think of Jurassic Park. Um, I think there might have been a little bit more to Jurassic Park than what we really thought of. And I think that that's a really interesting take on that. So these people were too busy
Playing.
trying to play God is.
Yeah, it's absolutely mind blowing. So, you were saying from what you kind of gathered from this podcast, which we can include in the Atlantis playlist, it
Yeah,
was one of the Dark Journalists
dark
ones.
journalists. Yeah,
And so it seems as though what they had done is they were experimenting with DNA and they had recreated these beasts or these kind of dinosaurs. And
yeah,
it's just like, oh my God. And straight away, yeah, I just thought of Jurassic Park. I'm like, that's exactly what they did in that movie. And it's just absolutely crazy, isn't it? And so then they realize that you can't live with dinosaurs very
yeah.
well.
They just overran them,
Mhm.
which sounds like a lot of our pests today, even like some of these bugs I never seen from the 70s or 80s are all
Yeah.
over. I mean, you just wonder what's all being manufactured and what's a real bug and what's what's not a real bug. It's like you look at ticks and they just look like devil bugs.
Yeah, that's
Gross
right.
things. Anyways, I just wonder about that stuff. I don't know.
I know it gets
So
makes you think, doesn't it? Like what's being developed?
these all these invasive species our planet has, you
Yeah.
know. So the next reading goes, the entity was in the Atlantean land in those periods when there were the second divisions, or when there was the destruction of the lands, which made Poseidia the remaining portion in which there was the greater activity of the sons of the law of one. So Poseidia basically was the main island that was left,
Yeah.
and that the Emilius group held that seat. They held the power of Poseidia. So I'm sure the Belial group was just, you know, plotting on how to take that down to where
Yeah.
they could. But yeah, so I think that that's interesting that the Emilius group still was strong
Hmm.
at this point, somewhat. They weren't taken out completely. So then after that, then they started building, I think, more of what we think of Atlantis being circular. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how, because Casey talks about all that too. So it'll be a lot of fun to get into that.
And I think, yeah, they had to do that for some form of protection and
Yes, the
having the
fortress.
water in between, like what, castles and things like that have done in the past to
Those
be to protect
moats.
themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Good point.
Yeah. So maybe that's where they got the inspiration from to do that.
Yeah. These were the periods in which there was the application of much of that being discovered or rediscovered today, in the application of power to modes of transit, as well as the use of nature's means for a helpful force in giving greater crops for individual consumption. Also, they were periods when a great deal of thought was given as to conveniences of every nature, from reading 2562-1.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, so we think about the technology in the vehicles they allegedly had.
Hmm.
The airships sound like they were huge in Atlantis, like they took pleasure rides. And when we talk about this, it just sounds like Tartaria to me.
Yes.
We're going to
So
bring up more Tartaria stuff as we go because it's interesting.
it is very interesting. And because like both Jennifer and I have kind of deep dived a bit into the whole Tartaria theory, and it's very, very interesting. And it just does not make sense that there was these extravagant buildings and when people were supposedly in a horse and carriage. And so it just makes sense that it could be related to Atlantis
Yeah,
because,
because I mean, I do believe we had our airships, but I think it's all Atlantean technology. It's
yeah,
not Tartarian technology, it's Atlantean technology.
because just the detail and how big these buildings are, it's just, yeah, there's just too much that just doesn't make sense. And
Yeah.
also, a lot of them, if you look at them, they kind of look like energy grids.
Yes. Yeah.
And and so it's clear from the readings of Edgar Cayce that these Atlanteans were just so advanced with their technology.
They, yes, they had, he talks about they had power stations and they had
Yes.
these fire stones and these two-eye stones. Um, However you want to look at it, they're crystalline magic, we can say.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, it created free energy. It created free energy for the little space vehicles that people just went out their door and hopped in and just putted through the sky. It powered everything.
Yeah, I actually took some notes of some things that I wanted to include about, like, there was just mentioned in some of the readings about, well, obviously the aeroplanes, and then it sailed in other elements, which is just absolutely fascinating.
And we're going to get into some readings where he basically says, yeah, that they had one vehicle and it went
Mhm.
through water, air, and mountains.
I mean, it's just,
They could go through all the elements, he said.
can you imagine? Let's
Space,
just,
too. He talks about space, the Atlanteans in space.
yes, that's right. I'd forgotten about that. But can you just imagine? Yeah, let's just go for a drive through the mountain.
I just think what a time that must have been. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
Oh my goodness. But yes, okay, let's
No.
get let's get to the next slide.
In Atlantean land during the second of destructive forces that brought destruction to those of the one faith and to those of Belial, a brother of Prince of Atlantis whose name was Atlan. From reading 416-1, and we have a date for this reading, October 8th, 1933. So it's interesting he makes a lot of these readings and bless his son Edgar Evans because he's the one that wrote this one book and
Mhm.
he went through so many of his father's readings trying to piece together the different destructions.
Yes.
And some of these readings were just, a decade apart or 2 years apart or 6 years apart, and he would kind of come back to the similar things, the similar pattern, we'll say, that kept showing up. So it's really fascinating to me that there was a Prince of Atlantis. I
Yeah.
want to know more about this character. I hope we come across more of him when we dig into some of this stuff, because I think
Yeah.
he ended up on his own island. Because I think there's an island, and then does this kind of refer to Atlas? Like we get into the mythologies, things like
Yeah.
that. I just kind of wonder about that too. It's all very interesting.
It is. But and because there was the island of Alta, so there's a lot of kind of plays on the word Atlantis,
Atlas.
isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yep.
absolutely fascinating. I know I was pretty blown away when we came across that reading because I was like, oh wow, there was a prince. But I guess it
Yeah.
makes sense that they would have had that. But yeah. Okay, so I'll read the next one. In Atlantean land, when there were those disturbances due to confusion arising between those in authority that would make for the universality of knowledge of all nature, and those that held for caste or position, from reading 1302-2, December 22nd, 1936.
So here it sounds like we have groups that don't want to share the universal knowledge.
Yeah. And they just, yeah, we're trying to cause confusion and fighting for control of that information.
It sounds so much like present day.
It
They don't want
does,
us to
doesn't it?
know the truth of humanity,
A
kind of
lot of
safeguard
hidden
hidden.
relics and certain sites, ancient sites that we're not allowed to go to,
Yeah,
including Antarctica. People are not allowed to go very far. You know, you get to a certain point and you're like, okay, turn around and go back.
yeah,
So it's like, what are they hiding?
yeah. So the next reading goes, of upper classes in Poseidon land, belittled self for better understanding between those that ruled and those that supplied necessities. From reading 280-1, which was read on February 22nd, 1933. So again, it sounds like present day. Some people think that there's certain parties of government that's helping them,
Hmm.
and but they're really not. So there's that confusion
Yes.
of what's helpful, what's not helpful. And I think that's a really interesting reading too. So this slide just kind of shows a little bit what was going on between the people
Yeah, and what
and
life was like for
and the
them.
rulers
Yes.
of the time.
Yeah. And, you know, they clearly had different classes or different levels of people, just like they do today. And yeah, it's very, very interesting to
And
hear
this,
that.
yes, and another thing I learned from the Dark Journalist podcast this week, it's X Series 110.
Hmm.
He talks about how the mystery schools in Atlantis and how they started kicking out the Amelius group, from my understanding. I want to re-listen to this podcast to make sure, but they were kicking out the entitled mystery school initiates. And they're like, we need to get rid of these people. We need to bring in just your normal Joe on the street selling a loaf of bread. Anybody, so they started doing these searches to basically pull in better initiates
Well,
because it was
probably more
getting so
humble.
unbalanced. Yeah.
Wow. Because if you think about it, people with a big ego are not going to be very good to be training in a mystery school because
No.
you get broken down as you're going through these initiations. And they need people that are humble, not people that, you know, are entitled and think that they.
And they had so many different levels of these mystery schools.
Mhm.
One wasn't the same. They all had different levels of knowledge. They all taught different things. And it they taught spirituality and science as one.
Yep.
So that's something that is really, we've obviously been very disconnected from in present day.
Hmm.
But still, they kind of kick the crap out of each other. So I don't really know how. I mean, I'd love to go back to that, but gosh, I don't even know if humanity could handle that.
No.
Maybe in a couple thousand, maybe in 1,000 years or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we still have quite a
It's
bit
gonna
of
take time.
development to go through before we could get to that.
Yeah. But anyways, I'll let you go with the next one.
Sure. At the time when rebellious forces disputed the acts and laws pertaining to the communication with what is termed in the present unseen forces, entities saw upheavals from destructive forces from the prisms, activities that brought fires to the surface from nature's storehouse. Reading 820-1, read on February 8th, 1935. So,
And here we go again.
yeah, so communicating with these unseen
Once,
forces.
isn't that, I appreciated that mention because he's saying, they're not communicating with anything good.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, to learn about the destructive forces and the prisms and how to change these rays to create this unharmonious energy
Well, yeah,
pockets.
destructive energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, so the Amelius group, we're using the crystalline energy for good reasons and to be helping everyday living, to give free energy, empowering their communication devices and their cars and machinery and all of the kinds of things that they had. But
Even to grow bigger crops.
yeah,
I
that's
think I wonder if that's where electroculture stems from, because I'm sure they did crystal.
right.
Like if you think about like that time where they utilized crystals, I'm sure they had crystal gardens and the natural metals, the copper and things like that to help bring that etheric energy down to help them with their crops and their food.
Fascinating. I hadn't
We're
thought
going to get
about
into more
that.
to Atlantean food. Yeah, I was wondering how they did things. So he's starting to mention it. We're starting to see more of that.
So fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, the Bilal group just wants to experiment and
Ruin that stuff, make it some poison.
mhm. And if people remember from the last episode that when we listened to the episode by Gigi Young about the mad scientists, she gives us a clue as to who these unseen forces were that they were communicating with. And in that
Yeah.
video, if you're interested in learning more about it, she explains that they were the Martians, the Mars people that were only the ones that were left that had not graduated. So basically, they had not lived in nature. They did not, live in that universal consciousness. They were the ones that did not graduate and were kind of stuck and they needed somewhere else to go. And apparently, they were kind of communicating with all kinds of planets. And they just happened to find the Bilal group who were reaching out with using the crystal energy to communicate with somebody because they wanted technology. They wanted to be like gods.
Yeah.
And it was because they allowed them in that we now have. And so, what Gigi Young explains is that these beings have not left. They have been here on planet Earth since Atlantis. So just because Atlantis went down, they didn't leave, they're still here. So it's very interesting in how there's this repetition and we're noticing these similarities happening today. Hmm.
But I was thinking, are these the actual fallen angels? Like, everybody always wonders about the fallen angels, and there's a lot of mystery behind it. There's a lot of different explanations. Everyone has a theory about it.
Yeah. Well, this
Because
makes a
obviously
lot of sense. I mean, I
because they've,
haven't decided my mind on it, but they would be the perfect candidates for it.
yeah, and I think, we need to always stay open-minded with this
Of
concept
course.
of the fallen angels, because I don't think anybody of us really truly understand it.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's really fascinating to me.
Yeah, me too. I know. Okay, would you like to read?
So, as indicated, the entity was associated with those who dealt with mechanical appliances and their application during the experience. As we find, it was a period when there was much that has not even been thought of yet in the present experience from reading 440-5 from December 20th, 1933. So we've kind of mentioned different times the Atlanteans had microwaves or they had televisions, they had
Yeah,
phones, they had
they
electronically
had
devoiced
radios
radios. I think it was more of a communication thing.
kind of
Yeah,
radio. Okay.
yep, radios.
Yeah, maybe it was like for the vehicles for them to communicate to each other.
I wonder.
Hmm.
Yeah, did they have like little CBs or did they have like,
Yeah.
we'll find, maybe we'll find out. We'll never know.
Yeah.
But the next reading is going to be a very, very long reading. So Paul and I are just going to read sections of it and discuss it because this is where it gets really deep
Yeah.
into the technology that the Atlanteans had. So,
And we felt it
so
was too important to not include it, even though it was a really long one.
it explains the whole, almost like the whole second destruction in itself and like how technologically advanced they were. It's just mind blowing. So, Paul, I'll let you start and then we'll just kind of bounce back and forth. Is that, yeah.
Sure, sure. We can take
Okay, awesome.
turns.
Yeah.
Okay. About the Firestone, the entity's activities then made such applications as dealt both with the constructive as well as destructive forces in that. It would be well that there be given something of a description of this so that it may be understood better by the entity in the present. Yeah.
And I'm going to keep going because this Firestone was used for so many good things, but then when the Belial group got it, all hell broke loose. So
Yeah.
this is interesting for us Tartaria fans. In the center of a building, which would today be said to be lined with non-conductive stone, something akin to asbestos, with other non-conductors, such as are now being manufactured in England under a name which is well known to many of those who deal in such things.
Mhm.
So I was curious, I kind of wanted to look it up and I have it, I'm sorry, but during like the 19, I think this was probably maybe in the 30s, who was making this in England at the time? So who's he talking about here? Like he's
Yeah.
specifically mentioning some group.
Yeah, at the time that were making something similar to asbestos
Yeah.
with other non-conductors. So
So
it's
they're
really
building something. Like what?
Mhm. Yeah, it just kind of makes you wonder, hey. So we'll continue on with reading this very long reading. The building above the stone was oval or a dome, wherein there could be a portion for rolling back, so that the activity of the stars, the concentration of energies that emanate from bodies that are on fire themselves, along with elements that are found and not found in the Earth's atmosphere.
Wow.
What does that sound like?
So let's think about our buildings around the world. All these
Mhm.
domes,
Yeah.
and there are in my state, there's what we would consider to be elite colleges, you could say,
Hmm.
have observatories to where they have these domes and these domes open up and they observe. Well, it's interesting because in some of these colleges there's only a select group of students that are initiated into some of these groups, clubs, however you want to look at them. So I think that that is very Atlantean to me, to where they are saying it's Tartaria, and we go back to this, and I just really struggle with this. That this is all Atlantean technology, and what they could harness from the energies that they knew from these firestones. I'm assuming they had these firestones and these domes,
Hmm.
and I mean they did probably many things, I'm sure, but how they could harness that elemental power
Yeah,
just through what's already here.
I
And then
know.
they obviously messed with, they went against the nature's elemental powers too.
Yeah. Hmm.
Well, I'm going to move on to the next one because I don't, some of these are stumpers
Hmm.
and it takes time to digest them and try to make sense of it. And his readings are very riddly. He doesn't, I mean, he comes out and says a lot, but it's also a lot to interpret as well.
Yeah.
The concentration through the prisms or glass, as it would be called in the present, was in such manner that it acted upon the instruments which were connected with the various modes of travel through induction methods, which made much the same character of control as would in the present day be termed remote control through radio vibrations or directions, through the kind of force impelled from the stone acted upon the motivating forces in the crafts themselves. So I interpret this that they're using this firestone for energy to run their ships, their airships, their vehicles, everything
Yeah. With remote controls. I mean, yeah, that's
with
kind of
remote
how I
controls.
gathered it as
Yeah.
well. They're using the Firestone to, yeah, get these vehicles to go to different places and direct them. And
like air traffic control, kind of,
Yeah.
sort of, like maybe.
hmm It's crazy, isn't it? It's fascinating. Like just
It's so fascinating.
I mean, just imagine being back then in that time and just seeing all these vehicles just flying about in the sky and on the and going through the mountains and going, going through the under the ocean. Oh, my goodness. And because he mentions that some of these vehicles were used as pleasure vehicles, so they weren't all just to get from A to B, they were literally using them to view different places and go travel. They probably went and traveled other places around the earth as well.
I think so. I think these airships, these Zeppelins, I've seen different documentaries or people cover it and they say they had cabins. They make us believe that it only fit like a few people, but no, these fit thousands of people, I believe.
They were
And
ginormous by the sounds
they
of it.
had living quarters and it was a very comfortable way to travel
Well, I think it'd be like a big cruise ship, but in
in the sky.
in the
I mean, we
sky.
think of airplanes, but these things I think just cruised along like a ship, just floating through the air. Time wasn't as restrictive then as it is now, I imagine.
Yeah.
If they had this technology, um, yeah. This is
Yeah.
where I think the golden age gets ripped off in a sense.
Yeah.
In this truther community, new age jazz, where they're like, oh, the golden age, blah, 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 blah. Well, are we remembering a better time from Atlantis?
Mm,
And that
absolutely.
isn't going to necessarily be no golden age is the same, depending on the level of humanity's spiritual evolution.
Yeah, and it's also very, I'm kind of curious because, I kind of recently learnt that it's kind of going around on the internet at the moment that back in the day, people before electricity was really invented, people kind of slept in two shifts. They kind
I've
of
seen that myself.
Yeah. And I was just like, what? So like they would sleep from like, when the sun went down for a few hours, maybe 3, 4, 5 hours, get up for a couple of hours and do various different things, and go back to sleep again for a little bit and then wake up with the sun. And I'm just like, whoa. So time would have been so different, but they changed that and they made everybody do this 8 hour kind of sleep, 8 hours at work, 8 hours sleeping, and 8 hours to yourself for the industrial age, basically, so that because it's not going to work, because people in factories and being on the clock for certain things, it was just not going to work if people were, sleeping and living that way. That worked if you're kind of working on the farm or whatever. So,
And I,
it,
I wonder if that helped people have a balance in their body with the night and the day, if
well,
that makes sense. Because
you know,
nighttime is peaceful. If I have a late night and I'm up way hours in the morning, and it happens, it's like there's a peace to embrace.
Well, it's the God hours. It's the time in the middle of the night, like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, when your brain is so creative. I mean, Wayne Dyer, if you've heard of Wayne Dyer, he talked about this. He would often wake up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and that's when he would write all of his books. Apparently, Mozart came up with the best of his music during this time. It's like
Like
the
a connection
golden
time.
Yes, connection with God, and you just channel, and people would create beautiful music and art and write and poetry and all kinds of things. So they've taken that away from us and
That's good
making
to
us
know.
making us sleep through it. And it's like that's our most amazing creative time, and we're all being forced to sleep through it. And I think it's very much more in nature too to be like that, because we're not producing melatonin naturally anymore, because we've all got all these lights on and electricity going, and we're cooking dinner and we got the TV on, and it's so much. It's too much for our body to naturally, if we all had oil lamps and candles and we kind of had our dinner before the sun went down and kind of naturally, we would naturally
Worked with
produce.
nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious as to whether, that's what it was like at this time or not, and what their sleeping habits were like. I mean, I would
I
never have thought of
wonder.
that before, but it's only
I
just occurred to
know.
me.
That's interesting.
Mm. The building was constructed so that when the dome was rolled back, there might be little or no hindrance in the direct application of power to various crafts that were to be impelled through space, whether within the radius of vision or whether directed underwater or under other elements or through other elements. So there
I
we
mean,
go.
really, it's just like this is where he's talking about crafts, vehicles, however we want to, transportation,
Hmm.
how they can go through everything and anything. There's no limits to these vehicles that they created.
It blows my mind.
It's mind blowing to me.
It's alchemy, you know,
Yes.
going through as it going to
It,
space, going
and
underwater and
let's
through.
talk about space a little bit if you don't mind, because we
Uh-huh.
have this, I believe Billy Carson went into a lot of the face on Mars, or these, they say they've discovered pyramids on Mars
Yeah.
and things on the moon and things like that. You know, these were probably the Atlanteans. I don't necessarily, I question a lot.
Hmm.
And the whole UFO alien narrative, I think, has just really taken us off course. And this is my opinion.
Hmm.
And I think that, we need to, again, it's steering us away from Atlanteans' technology of what could have potentially been our past to where how powerful we really were and the things we were capable of doing. Why would they give that to aliens, right? Just to send us off to keep us not finding
Going
out.
down a different path and not helping
Yeah.
us to realize the
Is this
power that we
Atlantis?
have.
This
Yeah.
Atlanta stuff is just really, the more I look into it, the more I'm just like, wow, this is
Incredible.
unbelievable.
Hmm.
Um,
And well, the Atlanteans were our ancestors, and they don't want
yeah,
us to know about it because then
yeah,
we realize, oh my God, our ancestors could do all this incredible stuff. We have the ability to do this too. Whereas if they palm it off to it being aliens and they're seen as our gods, as they say in the different
yeah,
stories and things, then
hmm,
it's very convenient
yeah,
because then that keeps us small.
yes, yeah.
Mhm.
We're looking to these whatever we want to call them, that they have more power, but no, it's no, they don't at all. It's we have the ability. I think the technology is hidden for probably good reason. We're going to get into that in a probably episode or two,
Yeah.
um, and how the Atlanteans, they did leave information behind for us to find, but it's set to the point where only specific people can find it, or specific people can. And Edgar Cayce talks a lot about that, so we'll get more into that. But it's a, yeah, there, I'm sure there's groups out there. You think about like the movies Indiana Jones, they want these ancient
Yeah.
relics and these things like that. I believe those groups are out there trying to find these relics, trying to replicate this technology.
Yeah.
And even when we had our Roswell here in the United States, which I think was 47, maybe, I could be off on a year or so. I mean, Edgar Cayce passed away in 1945. What kind of information were they getting from Edgar Cayce to be able to develop some of these crafts? And I mean, are these crafts that we think are alien ships?
Actually
Did the
man-made.
Atlanteans have similar crafts, you know?
Yeah, because it sounds like it.
Because from my understanding, the U.S. military has crafts that can go in and out of water and things like that.
Right.
So
Wow.
you
Well,
just
this
kind of
just
want just questions.
puts a whole nother perspective on
Yeah,
what we've been told about certain things, doesn't it?
yeah,
Wow. Okay,
yeah.
we'll move on to the next slide. But yeah, it's definitely got us thinking. And Millie's decided to join us. Just,
I see the cattail.
yeah, I know, but it's like, thanks, Millie.
The preparation of this stone was solely in the hands of the initiates at the time, and the entity was among those who directed the influences of the radiation, which arose in the form of rays that were invisible to the eye, but acted upon the stones themselves as set in the motivating forces. Whether the aircraft were lifted by the gases of the period or whether for guiding the more of pleasure vehicles that might pass along close to the earth or crafts on the water or under the water. So here we're talking about, we just kind of covered a little bit of that just a minute ago.
These then were impelled by the concentration of rays from the stone, which was centered in the middle of the power station or powerhouse, as would be the term in the present. So that's what we would call it in these days. Yeah, so they basically were using the Firestone as a power to power everything with energy.
So, do you know if there was just one Firestone or was there multiple Firestones?
It kind of
But
seems like
I think they'd have to have more than one.
there must have had more than one. It makes me think of the Disney Atlantis movie, and they show that in there, and they show this red crystal that's used to kind of power up all the vehicles and everything. So yeah, it's definitely very interesting.
In the active forces of these, the entity brought destructive forces by setting up in various portions of the land, the kind that was to act in producing powers for the various forces of the people's activities in the cities, the towns, and the countries surrounding same. These not intentionally were tuned too high and brought the second period of destructive forces to the people in the land, and broke up the land into these isles, which later became the scene of further destructive forces to people in the land, and broke up the land into the isles, which later became the scene of further destructive forces in the land. From reading 440-5, which was taken on December 20th, 1933.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's heavy.
So they accidentally tuned it up too high and they kind of accidentally just destroyed their island even more.
How messed up is that? Which makes me nervous of all these data centers they're popping up everywhere that they want to place in the United States. It's like, well, what kind of energy are they harnessing with these? And is this something that the Atlanteans tried to do? Just in different avenues, different reasonings, different ways to harness it. So I think we all need to be very leery of these data centers for many reasons.
Yeah.
The frequency isn't into nature's laws, and we could have a problem, big one, arise from this. And
Yeah.
it really bothers me also, as I've heard through many different podcasts and different times, and oh, America was the new Atlantis. This is something that was even spoken about back in the day with former presidents and things like that. And I'm like, well, I don't really want America to be the new Atlantis. It's like I think a lot of us have incarnated back here and we're in America. But what's going to happen? How are we going to course correct? I mean, we're
Yeah,
not figuring this out. If this happened and there was three major destructions, we don't need a fourth one. And so I just
exactly.
wanted to mention those little bit of a doomsday stuff, something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and well, I mean, that's why we're sharing this information. That's why
Yeah.
Edgar Cayce shared this information, and his son, obviously spent a lot of time and work putting together the book that we have gotten a lot of the information from. We shared in our last episode that a lot of this information we're getting from the companion, the Edgar Cayce companion, and then also the book written by his son, who would have just spent, yes, that one, that's right. He just would have spent hours and hours going through all of the readings and then putting them together. And he's actually very conveniently broken them down into the three different destructions. And so that's been extremely helpful for us to use as a source of this information. And
And
he would have done that for a good reason.
I was just going to mention him. So Edgar Evans, the son, the younger son, had a reading and was informed that he was one of the ones that brought the destruction of Atlantis, and he was labeled the dreaded one. And
Mm-hmm.
he, I believe he was in some type of engineering field, but he never got in. He stayed away from military and trying to get caught up in all of that, to course correct.
Right. Yeah.
So that's so interesting to me that you've got, Edgar Cayce, who once lived a life as Rata, and then he's reading his son, and his son was part of this massive destruction.
I know. Isn't that mind blowing?
Wild.
And I mean, it just makes sense when you read about the reincarnation and the karma.
Yes.
And
And
yeah,
even him, like we just talked about how many hours the man and years he put into this. And that was his way of course correcting. It's
yeah.
like, I got to get this information out there. People need to be aware that this happened.
Hmm. Yeah, the future's going to be very interesting, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is.
Okay,
And we're gonna,
so,
yep, and we're gonna circle back to the biblical references here.
mhm,
So
which is interesting. Question: in relation to the history of Atlantis as presented, at what period did the flood, as recorded in the Bible in which Noah took part, occur?
here we go. Answer. In the second of the eruptions, or as is seen, 2000 to 2006, before the Prince of Peace, as time is counted now, or light years, day and night years, not light years as the Akashic records, or as the esoteric records, or as counted by astrology or astronomy, in the speed or the reflection of a ray of light. From reading 364-6. And this is so confusing. And Paul and I were talking briefly before we started recording. And I personally have interpreted this that Edgar Cayce's like, there's just no such thing as time. And
Mhm.
there's 1,000 different ways you can measure time. And we're just not supposed to understand it.
And unless I
That is,
had a, I was just, I did have another thought though. What if the two in between, so the 2000 to 2006, what if that two in the middle was actually meant to be just TO, like from 2000 to 2006?
okay. Yeah, because
Possibly.
I had, it could, and I was even thinking, did he throw a year in there? But I don't know. Because
Yeah.
I even like wrote that out.
Hmm.
And to me, I came up with like 22,000 years, 22,600 years or something like that. And I'm like, I don't know what he means. But then I kept reading past that and I just thought, I think this is just his way of saying it doesn't, it was in the concept of time, it was a blink of an eye ago.
Yeah.
Because this time there is no, yeah, it's hard to explain. We're not supposed to understand it. I do think that to a certain level. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's very interesting. So Jennifer and I both believe when he's referring to the Prince of Peace that that would be Yeshua. So it's very interesting to relate that, the Bible, the story of Noah and this big flood that happened. And so it happened around the second destruction. And so it's curious because, because they were messing about with the crystal and the crystal, it was so powerful and destructed the island. Did that cause some of the flooding? Did it cause the rain to did it cause it to rain so much? I mean, yeah, it's very interesting that there seems to be some kind of correlation there.
Yes, and in the Bible, they're saying God is punishing us by flooding the earth because of this or that. But according to these Casey readings, it's because the Atlanteans were,
Messing about.
yeah, yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. I almost said something a little more harsher. So yeah, I feel that that's just another mind control mechanism to make people feel we deserved that,
That to
that
happen.
God is angry. And I just don't think that's how God is. I don't think he's causing these destructions. I think it's I think it was the Atlanteans
Yeah,
at
I
this
think it
point.
was humanity itself. Just
Yes, exactly.
yeah, definitely. I don't think I yeah. after learning everything I've learned over the past years, I no longer believe that there is a God up there that's judging us and
Yeah,
punishing us when we're not doing the right thing. I think that's a very human thing.
yeah.
So the last one is the entity was in Atlantis when there was the second period of disturbance, which would be some 22,500 before the periods of the Egyptian activity covered by the Exodus, or it was some 28,000 before Christ. C. Reading 470-22. So I guess for anybody who knows the story in Exodus about Moses and all of the locusts, and there
I
was
think
the
it sounds like a lot of Belial black magic to me.
yes, it does. It does
I
sound a
think
lot.
he goes into the Exodus a little bit more. We're not covering that right now, but when I seen this reading, I thought I want to look into that more to brush up the stories of that. But I just thought, no, that was just black magic.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
Sound like it. I mean, turning sticks into snakes and making the water turn blood red. And yeah, it was just,
What did they drop in the sky to create the waters to turn red? You know, did they drop some type of chemicals? Um,
mm,
Even like the locust, did they like create them in a lab and fly up in an airship and dump balloonfuls of them like they do mosquitoes apparently? I don't know. I mean, you just wonder that you just know there's something more going on there
yeah,
that it's a mystery.
it definitely is. It's very mind-blowing and it's just so fascinating to look at it from a different perspective because growing up as a Christian, you're made to believe that that's just what it is
It's
and
God
everything else.
punishing us.
Mm. But it's more complex than that, isn't it?
Yeah, this makes more sense. I mean, to be honest, I just feel like this is more that there was these dark magicians doing this crap and plaguing humanity.
Yeah. And they did some incredible stuff.
Yeah, they
And
did. Yeah, they did. I mean, yeah, they sure did.
and Moses was initiated too, and he had a lot of incredible powers. So that's why he was able to compete with these dark magicians.
But then I've heard he was a dark magician, so I don't really know. I've heard so many things about these people. I don't really know. And I mean, but I guess I'm not going to put too much investment of energy to it because it's just their stories at this point. I mean, how do we know what's right and what's not? And you wonder if they did turn dark, if they started good and they turned dark and they flip flop. Because it sounds like some of these priestesses were flip flopping back and forth from the Emilius group to the Belial group.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, in my personal opinion, I think humans are very complex.
Yeah,
And we all have the potential to be very, very good, and we all have the potential to be very, very bad.
yeah,
And when people gain a certain amount of power and riches, it's I think that can definitely mess with somebody's ego. And
that's a
I
good
think
point.
that's somebody that had very good intentions in the beginning could very easily get caught up in all of that and start to do some not very nice things. So, yeah, it's very, very interesting. There are a lot of interesting characters in our history that have been painted as one way or the other, but I think it's more complex than that. I don't think it's as simple as that they were black and white. I
Yeah,
think there's a lot more to it. So, yeah, but it's very interesting.
yeah, for sure.
So, do you want to read that one, Jennifer?
Sure. The deluge was not a myth, as many would have you believe, but a period when man had so belittled himself with the cares of the world that the deceitfulness of his own knowledge and power as to require that there be a return to his dependence wholly, physically, and mentally upon the creative forces, Will this entity see such again occurrence in the earth? Will it be among those who may be given those directions as to how, where the elect may be preserved for the replenishing again of the earth? Remember not by water, for it is the mother of life in the earth, but rather by the elements fire from reading 3653-1. Sorry, Paul, I just thought I'd keep going to put it all
Oh,
together
that's fine.
because this is such a heavy quote
Yeah.
and it butts up to everything you just said a minute ago.
Yeah.
Perfectly, perfect spot for this last slide.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that he clarifies that the deluge was not a myth and that it really did happen. And it's just interesting that he says that it's because man had belittled themselves with the cares of the world. Like they had just become so caught up in the power and wanting to be gods and creating and manipulating with DNA and this crystal power. And they just, yeah, completely, egos just got way too big
Yeah.
and, yeah, created a big mess.
Yep. One we're apparently still dealing with a little bit today. I mean, it just sounds all so similar
It
to these
does.
power hungry people in our world that just it
Getting
isn't
very,
enough for them.
yeah, and they're getting very caught up with very artificial things. I mean, messing about with food and, the DNA of food and the DNA of humans and, mixing AI with humans and it's a little bit scary. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
lie.
Yeah, because we're going to move into the third here, which was roughly about 10,500 years ago, I believe, in that vicinity. And the reason that destruction is because they had done so much manipulation with human DNA, animal DNA, and they had these, what Edgar Cayce named as automatons,
Hmm.
and they were basically a slave race.
Yeah.
And the Amelius group wanted to allow them to spiritually evolve because they were of human DNA, but the Belial group was like, yeah, no, we're not, they don't need to evolve. So, yeah,
And that's very much what it's like with us everyday people. They don't want us evolving and realizing our true potential. They
no.
prefer
And
to keep us small and in the rat race.
yeah, and that moves into where Rupert Steiner talks about the arcane and how they're they're doing everything to prevent us from spiritually evolving.
Yeah.
And it goes into the eighth sphere, which is a very interesting concept that they talked about. Casey calls it something different, but Casey does talk about it.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I
but
think that
yeah,
would be an interesting topic to cover one time, I think.
yeah, because
Because,
it's a hard head wrap around.
yeah. Hmm.
But when you start piecing together all the AI stuff, it all starts connecting.
Yeah.
So
So
yes,
we created well, we got AI to create a little map to show us what it would have looked like after the ruins, well, after the second destruction, and to show us what it would have looked like with the islands all being broken up.
I think it's interesting that they put the R in Isle of Aryan, Aryan, because that really ties a lot, I believe, into the eugenics
Ah,
that have been
okay.
occurring over the years, and it's coming out more how much it's really been going on. And this is basically, to me, this stems back to the whole mad scientist thing of playing God and changing genetics and things like that. So I believe that was a real big thing during World War II
Yeah, yeah,
with
that would,
Adolf.
yes, he was
Yes, with
definitely playing
Adolf.
around with that.
And then I do believe that Poseidia was probably the biggest island, the biggest chunk that was left of the original continent.
Hmm. And that's where the Emilius group resided.
And what's interesting to me, again, we're going back to the Greek mythology of Poseidon, Neptune,
Yeah, it's very interesting how these myths kind of connect as
and
well.
yeah, and I mean, it's been a while since I studied Greek mythology, but wasn't he the god of the sea?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So with his
His
trident,
trident, yes.
um, interesting that Casey refers to that island as Poseidia.
Yes. That it was called that. Yeah. It
And we
is.
even have I've seen it called Ag. I've seen it called this Oogle here. I've seen it actually different things.
Mhm.
So where does that go into Ag? That reminds me of Gog and Magog.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. So I want to learn more about those particular islands, Like did the Belial group sit that island and they were shooting torpedoes across the I mean, what assholes? I mean, seriously. I just can see them being so childish and just being like, well, they are today,
Mm.
being destructive for no reason.
Just yeah, experimenting
It-
to see how far they can go without a care of how it's affecting.
And I have been seeing a little bit of these beached whales, and I have always, even years and years and years ago, I had always questioned why these whales would beach. And it's like they're doing all these tests out in the ocean. What are
At
they
different
searching
frequencies.
for? What have they found? What are they destroying?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
They're definitely looking for something.
And whales and dolphins, from my understanding, are such a sensitive creature on this planet. I've heard so many different myths about them in their own selves, whether, like, sometimes they're the protectors of Atlantis and they have certain knowledge. And I've even heard that you can't
Yeah.
even communicate with dolphins in the wild. Weird stuff like that. So there's a real big mystery around dolphins.
I've heard some interesting things about dolphins too, now that you mention it. That's very interesting.
And
And
I've heard horrible things about dolphins. Like they, do bad things too. There's so many different kinds. There's like pink dolphins in the Amazon and
oh wow.
yeah.
Well, there you go. Learn something new every day, don't you?
Yeah, there's some wild stories around dolphins. But you just wonder why they're being so destructive towards some of these animals out in the ocean. If they're doing it on purpose or if they just don't care if they're in the vicinity. But I just can't help but not think that the sonar is throwing off these animals' frequencies
Well, absolutely. And when you think about, I mean, that's how they communicate with each other. That's how they
through
know,
miles.
yeah, it's through their mind and they're going into the frequency of the ocean. And if that's being interfered with, then no wonder they're getting beached because they've got no idea where they're going because it's being messed with. And
Yeah.
so it's really sad.
Who knows if it's mashed their brains?
Yeah.
Are they, is this their way of testing their own new weapons of frequency?
Mm,
It's could be so many things, but yeah, bad stuff.
yeah.
So anyways, we appreciate everyone joining us today in our Debbie Downer episode of the second destruction of Atlantis. The Atlanteans
Yes.
sound like they were just, yeah, a little too big for their britches in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, they certainly were. That's for sure. So, yeah, and then in the next episode, we're going to get into the third destruction and what life was like for that third period of time. And then that was it after that. No more
No more
Atlantis. It was gone.
Atlantis, just the ones that fled.
Hmm.
And I think, there was millions of survivors from
Yeah.
Atlantis. And they went all over the planet.
Yeah. And I love hearing about the different kind of myths and legends that, native peoples have.
know,
all the various
right?
different, from all the various different countries. It's just so fascinating.
And another thing I found interesting is he talks about Mew a little bit as well. And I remember
Uh,
him saying something to the effect of there was a ton of refugees from Mew. In the way he labeled
right.
it out, it was the darker skinned people, the more indigenous people were the
Interesting.
ancestors from Mew. I think the
Wow.
Atlanteans were pretty fair skinned,
Yeah, okay,
um,
yep.
from my understanding. I mean, there was different races, but the Mew people were the indigenous people. I think of the beautiful Hawaiians and,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
And
So
like the
yeah,
Maori from New Zealand.
yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful indigenous people, the Native Americans,
Yep.
just yeah.
The Aborigines in
Aborigines. I know,
Australia.
I'm like that all the indigenous people that they're of an older bloodline of us Atlanteans.
Yep. Yeah.
But yeah,
And they've
it's
just got such
interesting.
fascinating stories. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this episode and all the fascinating little tidbits. And, if you have any fascinating little tidbits that you've learned, please share them in the comments below. We would love to hear from you and what you think. And please like, share, and comment. And we will see you in the next episode. Thank you for watching,
Thank you.
and thank you, Jennifer, for joining.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.